everyone. My name is Tara Bentley, and I'm the Executive Director for the Indiana Association of Home Educators, otherwise known as the IAHE.
And my name is Courtney Nalen. I am a homeschooling mom of two who also works full-time outside of my home and a volunteer with the IAHE.
Together, we're your co-hosts for Season 2 of the Homeschool Indiana podcast. We'll be here each week sharing information to help you homeschool, keep you updated on what you need to know, and have some fun along the way. So, let's get started.
Hi there. This is Courtney. Tara has stepped away today as I have the privilege and honor to sit down and speak with none other than Amber O'Neal Johnston. Amber is an established authority on including diverse voices in traditional curriculum and infusing culture and love for others into an intentional home environment. After wholeheartedly committing to follow a mainstream Charlotte Mason curriculum to homeschool her children, Amber became discouraged when months went by with little mention, if any, of the stories and accomplishments of Black people in her schoolroom. Devoted to bridging the gap for her 4 children, Amber began uniquely merging traditional classics with life-giving books, as well as creating a culturally rich home environment to ensure that her children's education honored their background, individuality, and sense of self-worth. Amber speaks, writes, and shares her observations on inclusive and culturally rich home education, family history, life-giving books, the beauty of homemaking, global travel, and more. I know that you are going to enjoy this conversation as much as I do.
Okay, well, thank you, Amber, so much for being here. I know that I have been looking forward to this for a while now to be able to talk to you on the podcast. And I'm just really grateful for you taking time out of your busy day, especially today of all days, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But I would love for those that maybe are not as familiar with you, maybe they're just kind of curious about who you are and your story leading up to homeschooling and developing life that you have in your passion that you have. And so how about we just start off with you just telling us a little bit about yourself?
Okay, so I live outside of Atlanta, Georgia with my husband, Scott, and we have 4 kids. The girls are 15 and 13, and the boys are 11 and 9, and they've all been homeschooled from the beginning. I run a small homeschool nonprofit here in my area for homeschooling families, and I write and speak about all things homeschooling with special focuses, a few special focuses, one on Charlotte Mason education, and one on diverse resources, especially books, but other aspects of homeschooling. I was a product of public education, the same as my husband also. So it's really funny to me that we ended up homeschooling. My parents were both public school principals. My sister and my grandfather were elected school board officials. So my family has deep ties and roots to the public school system, and that's still something that's near and dear to my heart even today. So it was my husband's idea to homeschool, so I'll blame it on him. And he just kept, I can't think of a better word, begging. He kept begging me. He just had this vision for this was what we should do with our family. I was not on board. I was like, that's for weird people, and I'm not weird, but come to find out, it's not just for weird people, and I am weird. So I was off on both sides. And so he said, would you just try it for a year? And if you really just are unhappy, then I'll never ask you about it again. And I was like, absolutely fine, because that's worth it for you to stop talking to me about it. I was like, it's going to be terrible. I know I'm not going to like it. And it was pre-K at that. And I took it so seriously. I was like, okay, here's the thing. I had been a stay-at-home mom. And I just remember this one particular Monday being like, okay, now I'm a homeschool mom. And then we sat down and proceeded to do the exact same thing we had been doing. But it was a change in my mind. And, we started, we joined a homeschool group, and it ended up being one of my favorite years ever of parenting. And we never looked back. We just kept going. So that's kind of how we got started in homeschooling. And at the time, we were in just a really lovely homeschool group. I'm still friends with the women from that group, though the group has since disbanded. In my family, we were the only Black family in the group. And I didn't think too much of it in the beginning. But as the kids started getting older, my oldest daughter was noticing that she was different. And it kept coming up in so many different circumstances. And she's kind of like, why don't we ever read about people who look like us? Why don't we ever talk about that? How come the art we look at never has pictures of people with brown skin? How come we never listen to music with people? She just kept asking day after day after day. And I had to take a step back and just wonder, like, what's the answer to those questions? And why is it that way? And I know that I was doing what all my friends were doing, and it was so beautiful in their homes, but it like wasn't working for my daughter. And I was giving her bits of the best parts of the education that I received, that's all I knew. And yet she was pushing back against it. And so I ended up just doing a lot of research and a lot of prayer, and just kind of exploded my whole homeschool and started over. And what you see in my home now that I share on social media and on my website, that's kind of the new creation that came out of that angst, or maybe out of that painful period, is something really, really beautiful. And ever since then, I've been sharing my examples of, infusing Black culture and history into my home, but really with my message being that every homeschool parent needs to bring themselves to the table, and that they are part of the homeschool, who they are and where they come from and their experiences, whatever that may be. It might not have anything at all to do with ethnicity in your home. It might be something different, but just empowering parents, especially moms, to show up fully at the table with your kids and let them know you intimately and know, all the parts of you, because that helps them know themselves. And it's more than just, ABCs and reading and writing. Homeschooling involves the home and the people in it too. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
I love that. I was not homeschooled either. I totally didn't think that we'd be able to do it either. So you're saying like you thought you'd totally fail. And I was like, I did too. I was like, I can't do it. And yet here we are with high schoolers. Like, who would have thought?
Yeah. It's so funny to me. I was at the park like last year one day, and these ladies, I met some other women there at the park who were also homeschoolers that I didn't know. And like throughout the conversation, at one point they're like, it's so good to be able to like meet a mentor mom. And I looked at her and I was like, and then I'm in my head, I'm like, oh my gosh, I think she just called me old. But I was like, but our kids are playing, like my 9-year-old and your 9-year-old are playing, but that was her oldest kid and it was my youngest kid. But I'm just like, yeah, I can't believe I have teenagers and high school is going on and that I'm a mentor mom. I was like, oh my gosh, this is wild. I don't know how this happened.
Oh, I love that. I always think it's kind of funny, like if somebody says, I don't know about the mentor mom, but if they're like, they'll say like a veteran mom, which I understand the concept. But I also feel like I'm still learning. Like every day I have to reevaluate. And if we're being truthfully like transparent, every day I have to tell the Lord that I'm just like giving it to him to take care of, because of all the stuff that I'm always like, but are we sure that we're not I'm not failing at this? So whenever somebody else is like, you're so strong and great, and I was like, no, I'm getting by.
Yeah. So. Oh my gosh, that is so true. And because I talk a lot about like history and cultural stuff and all that, people are like, oh my gosh, you're you know so much about that. I'm always like, girl, I'm 3 nights ahead of my oldest kid. Just 3 nights of reading ahead. Like I do not know it all. If it comes across like that, then forgive me, because I literally am like trying to read like, okay, all right, I got 72 hours on this oldest kid. That's how much I know. But it's fun and it's been really stunning in a lot of ways.
I love that so much. It's so true. And I love the realness that you share. I think that a lot of people respect that you're so willing to just be open and still be encouraging, but having that openness of like, hey, especially with you saying about how your oldest was like, why aren't we doing this? Why aren't we seeing people that look like us, and being open to saying, hey, my kid is the one that brought this to my attention. That's real world. And as a mom, okay, well, that's a good point. Let me look into what we needed to do. Did you find that that you had a lot of resources that you could go to look? I mean, you can Google anything these days, but I would imagine that, like, was there a lot out there that you could pull from?
There really wasn't. And, it was 2 things. One, I didn't know what I was looking for, right? Like, it was almost like, can I get a manual on lactifying an education. I mean, I didn't know like what I needed to do.
Yeah.
It was so foreign to me. It's something I never had and I had never seen anywhere else. And so I didn't know what to even Google, but also nowadays people are like, oh, but there's this and there's that. And I'm like, fast forward, I told you she's 15. So this is way before, like, let's say, George Floyd or anything where more resources became more available and all of that. It really wasn't there. And what was there wasn't curated. And I guess that's the biggest part of it. So everything that I did for my kids, I started from scratch. Being a Charlotte Mason family, literature was already something that was very important. And so I started with books. And that's how I kind of became known as this lady who deals with books a lot, because I didn't know the stories. So I couldn't teach my kids like maybe the way you would learn in a classroom or something, because I did not know the information. And so I started looking for really good books where the author could teach all of us together. And I just saw like what it did for the kids, but I also saw what it did for me, because it kind of ministered to that little girl in me that had never had those things. And, my daughter, she was bold in like knowing exactly what was missing, whereas I just didn't know things could ever be any different. So I didn't ask for anything different. And so it was really hard to find resources. And I feel like I had to be very scrappy. And that has been a part of my mission ever since. From the very first year that I pulled stuff together, the next year I started sharing on my website and other places what I had just done, what I had just finished. Hey guys, we studied this musician. Here's the poet. We read this. We watched these videos. And I just started putting it out there because I thought, well, I have already done all of this work, all of these late nights, all of this trial and error. And there's somebody out there, even if it's only one mom, if I could say, hey, you don't have to go through all that, because here's some ideas of what I found. And ultimately, I just never stopped. I kept doing that. And there's this growing body of work. And I know I was like speaking somewhere and they introduced me as a curriculum creator. And I was kind of looking at her like, I don't consider that for myself as a curriculum creator. I never sit down thinking, I'm going to create this curriculum to sell. No. It's always, I already did this for my kids, so now I'll put it out on the website for other people. So it's never been a job. It's always just been about sharing to try to save other people time and headache and heartache and all of that. So it's become easier to find resources, but what I really want most still isn't readily available, but I think that's changing.
I can't even imagine like having to literally just start from scratch. And like you said, being 15 years prior, that's a long time. And to be a part of that, I know you've been a blessing to so many people that are now like that, like out there trying to search for things, and being able to have you as a resource and as a mentor, but not like in an old way, but being able to say, oh, she did it. That's what I'm trying to do. And if she can figure it out from scratch, then I can be encouraged that I can do that as well, and just start a ripple effect. And that says a lot about your oldest being so bold, because that also, to me, I see that as being a good example for her in the future, to know that it's okay to be bold and to stand up and say, hey, why are things the way that they are? Or why can't we do that? Like, that's where the dreamers and the innovators come from, those that are bold and willing to step up and ask questions. So that also says a lot about you as a mom, because she felt like she could be bold enough with you to ask. So I think that's great.
No, thank you so much. I think I don't know that this could have occurred any other way, because it was because of my child. You know what I mean? You have that mama bear instinct. Like, you feel like your child's not getting what they need. You'll like, if I gotta wade through 50,000 books, if I have to ask people or research, like, I will figure this out, like, because you can't just not do it when you see that your child's hurting. So I think that I'm so thankful for her voice and her willingness to speak up in that way.
Yeah. What would you say has been the most unexpected way, I guess, that homeschooling has shaped you as a parent and as a person?
That's such a good question. I think before having kids, I worked in corporate America. I went to school, I have an MBA, and like, I was used to excellence, like operating excellently and being very organized and getting like immediate results. and things like that. And homeschooling has not been like that. The results are not immediate. It can be very difficult to feel organized. Things are not linear and all of that. So I think for me, one of the things that has been best is the ability to be more expansive in the way that I see life and all of its different possibilities, and to be softer and maybe self even about like my expectations. It's helped me to slow down and not be so like results oriented. And the funny thing is, the more that I did that, the kind of more peace that I felt. And yet here towards the end of high school, moving towards that with my oldest, I see the results. So it came back full circle. You know, when I let go of that need to like, I'm like, gosh, I talk to my kid about this, or we learn about this every day. And then my husband would come home and be like, what'd you guys learn? And they're like, nothing. And I'm like, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Or I would like plan all these amazing field trips and they'd be like, Mom, how come we never get to go to the aquarium? I'm like, you're joking, right? Like we've been there like 8 times. Like we used to have a membership there. You're saying you've never been. You've never been. And I'm like, what's the point of any of this? They don't remember anything. I'm doing all this. And so I just feel that it has made me realize that success looks different than maybe how we're taught from a traditional society perspective, and that I'm so thankful for being able to see that. And because I can see it in myself, I also have been able to see it so much in other people, which has helped me to be able to encourage other moms to say like, nope, consistency, just keep going. It's working. You just can't see it right now, but it's working, and don't grow weary. And enjoy yourself. Relax. It's going to be good.
Yeah. I know that you have talked about how you educate the whole child, looking at the whole child. Where did that view come from, and what does that look like for you?
So in short, it came from the fact that like I kind of grew up as being very academic child. Again, 2 principal parents. I mean, that school was very important, and that's not a problem. But I didn't explore other aspects of myself because it just wasn't built into my school system to do that. I remember in high school really wanting to take like cooking and sewing and some of the other classes, and they were in another part of our school. And I remember my counselor saying that those classes were not for college bound students, and I didn't have room in my schedule for those. And so like with reading, everything was assigned school reading. And I remember joining a book club as a young woman right out of college, and it was my turn to pick the book, and they were like, what do you want to read? And I was like, I don't know. And they were like, what do you like to read? And I'm like, no one's ever asked me what I like to read. I don't know. I just read what people tell me, you know? And so as I started getting older, I realized like I had to learn how to be me. Like, what do I like? And that it's okay. Like, I love cooking, and that's okay. And I can also read books and go places, and I can lead things, but I like to serve and all of this. And so I thought with my children, one of the things that I've enjoyed most about homeschooling is that I don't have to like rank subjects or areas for them. Like, you don't have to be STEM or bust, but like, yeah, I think it's great that you enjoy science. And then if you want to go paint after that science lesson, you can do that. Like both of those can be you fully. And then wanting to have a situation where there was no separation between like sacred and secular, because, you know, I kind of lived in this place where you don't talk about God on these days. And then I was deeply involved in my church. So like on Sunday, you talk about him all day. And that was kind of difficult for me. And I wanted my kids to be able to see that like when you're cooking, you're doing it to the Lord. And when you're doing math, you're doing it unto the Lord. And when you're singing outside in the rain and fishing across the street in the lake, like all of it is unto the Lord. And you don't have to separate that on any day of the week, or, you know, talk about it separately or differently in any way. So it's all been one grand experiment, to be honest, because I don't have a model for what it is I wanted. I guess I just wanted the kids to feel like they could always show up fully to the table, being all that they feel led by the Spirit to be, and that's different for each one of them. So one of the things that Charlotte Mason says that I always loved so much is that the Holy Spirit is the supreme educator, and the parent, we're just kind of the guide. It's not like everything comes through us to the kids. And that's another thing I always tell parents, you don't have to know how to do that. you don't need to know how to do that or how to teach calculus. First of all, he's 5, so you have a while to worry about that. But like, you'll never have to teach calculus if that's not ever something you want to revisit again. Like, it's going to be okay. It's not all on you. And so I think that's what I mean, the whole child speaking to their character and the spiritual aspects of life and combining them fully with what people may feel like is the secular part of life and all of that.
Yeah. It goes back to you recognizing what's best for your kids and what their needs are and what you want for them, and being able to explore that, whether it's in an interest, if it's culture and ethnicity or whatever it may be, that and a combination of all of that, and let them see that it is all about them as a whole person, a whole child, a whole human being, and that all of those things are all intertwined together. So if you could give like some advice, like on people that maybe they want to be able to incorporate life-giving books, culturally rich content, but they want to involve it more and incorporate it more in their homeschool environment. For someone that they say, I have that desire, I want to do that, but I literally have no idea where to even begin to look. Where would you suggest, or what would you suggest would be the route?
So I think I would start closest to home first. And like, what is it that's something about you and your family? And if you can't think of something about you, a grandmother, something a grandmother may have said to you once, or some place that she's from. And we always think, I hear this a lot, especially, if I'm just being honest, from some of my white friends, and they're like, I don't have anything cultural to share, we're just white. And I'm like, that's not true. And I'm like, your grandma grew up in Appalachia. That's like a whole nother country. Like, I've learned so much. Like, you can go deep through that, the music and the food and the people and the speech and the geography. Like, I would do a whole thing on just the arts of Appalachia and all that. Or, if you have family on the Pacific West Coast, that's completely different than growing up in the Midwest or the South. So it doesn't always have to be something that sounds like spectacularly exotic, right? So just kind of maybe even your family recipes. Why do you make that casserole? Where did it come from? When did you guys start making it? How'd your family get into bowling? Or my husband and my kids ski. I don't ski, but they do. And my husband's family, that's really important to them. And I was like, why is something in the cold so important to you? But, like hearing those stories about like how he grew up skiing and why that's important to his family and what it gives them and what it does for them. So I think like starting with what you know most intimately is a great place, because it gives you practice, like how to know a person, even if it's your own people. And then try to extend out and just pick any direction. Maybe in our family, like we studied a lot about Cherokee people. I mean, there are hundreds of tribes. I can't study all the Native Americans, all that lived in the United States and continue to live here now. But we live on land that they once lived on. And so that was an easy place to start at home. So I would recommend that. And obviously, right now things are growing in areas of ethnic diversity in terms of really high quality resources. So I specialize in Black American culture and history. So if you were looking for those books, I have tons of recommendations on my website and in my writings. And there are other Resilient Panda. She has all the beautiful living Asian books that she shares for kids because of her children. Usually it's going to be the work of a passionate mother. There's a website, Stories of Color, that my friend Nicole curates, and you can search by time period and country and type of thing and type this and that and all these different search functions, and it will pull up lists of living books, beautiful books to share with your children. So I think that starting close to home where it's less intimidating and going deep in that area is a good first step for everyone. And if someone thinks they don't have anything special to study, then I want them to reach out to me, because I'll find something.
Yeah. That's right. I bet you do. I bet you do. I love what you said about talking about it usually stems from a passionate mother, because that's very true. Let's talk about your new book, because I feel like this is a perfect time to mention it. Soul School, and it's been described as a labor of love. And so can you share what inspired it and what readers can expect from jumping all into all the information in there?
Yeah. So Soul School is a book about books, and it's they're all about books that were written by Black authors and illustrated by Black illustrators about Black people. And so the subtitle is Taking Kids on a Joy-Filled Journey Through the Heart of Black American Culture. So there are historical books recommended, and some of them are tough topics and things, but there is so much fun in here. There are kids going fishing and being adored by their grandparents, and science fiction and mysteries and fantasy and coming of age stories and historical fiction and all of those things, starting from toddlers going all the way through teens. And so that's the second half of the book. They're masterfully curated and annotated, really robust book lists where I go in and dig in and tell you why I chose this book and what it means and what will your children learn about themselves and about Black American culture and history at the same time. And there are discussion questions and project ideas and all the things that we love as homeschoolers. It's definitely in here. And then my favorite part, there's a section called second helpings. And so for every book I recommend, I have 2 second helpings. When I think of like soul food, you always go back for more. So if your kid liked this book, here is a second helping that they will also probably enjoy this book as well, or these 2 books as well. And that's the second half of the book. The first half of the book is really me, just what I would tell parents if I were sitting down at a coffee shop, having a nice cup of tea, and I wanted to tell you all that I look for in children's literature or young people's literature when I'm looking for great stories about Black people. Like, what is authentic to me? What am I looking for in terms of quality, but also topical? What do I want to see happening in those stories that will bring this idea of our culture to life? And I spend time talking about, like, not all Black people are the same, of course. So there could be a story that represents Black culture that may not be familiar to me, but I recognize it as an aspect of my culture that isn't something that I've necessarily lived out. So we can have diversity even within our own group of people, right? And so that's really what the book is about. It's a book of books. It's kind of a lot of homeschoolers are like, love Honey for a Child's Heart or Read Aloud Family and books like that, which I adore. So I've been a groupie of those types of books and loved them so much, but always wished that there was one that had characters like my family and my kids that they could clamor for, and I could just take the book to the library and check out everything and all of that. And so that's what this book is. It's an addition to that type of shelf, library shelf, alongside those books that you can dig into and have years worth of juicy reading.
Yeah. I was looking through it because, first of all, it's not the most important part, but it's so pretty, like on the front. I love the cover. It just automatically says, look at me and open me up and dive in. But I do love what you mentioned about how it's broken down into the different ages and that you have those thought starters and the digging deeper, as well as the second helping. I like that because it feels like a manual, like we talked about, like you need a manual. And so you want something that you can go and you can look at and it's from a real person. It doesn't feel like it's some scholar that has written this thing. It's still very, very well written, but it feels like you are reading it from a friend that's real life. I've lived this. I'm telling you, this is what works. And this, that is the feel that I get from it. And I love that it has those. Sometimes I love reading with my kids. Sometimes they like to, sometimes they don't. It depends on the mood. We all have our days. But sometimes I struggle with if a curriculum or some type of lesson, if they're like, well, discuss as a family this subject. And I'm like, how do I do? Okay. So then I tell my kids very openly, honestly, like, it says for us to discuss this, but I don't really know what to say. But I love that you give those thought starters to help you be able to discuss this with your kids and to open up that conversation. I just think that that's wonderful.
Yeah. And I think like one thing about, discussion questions when you have a book like this, I think my biggest fear is that people would see this book and say, oh, this is for Black people only. And it was really, really important to me for people to know that just like the other books, like Honey for a Child's Heart or any of those books are for everyone, this book is for everyone too. And so I wrote the discussion questions with that in mind. So, it's not going to be like how does it feel when your family sits down for a big soul food dinner every Sunday or something, you know, like that's very specific to only our culture, but the questions are more open-ended, you know, about like, how is this character's life similar to yours, or how is it different? Or, you know, in this, you know, they really miss their grandfather. Have you ever really missed someone who's no longer here? And how does that feel? What do you do to help soothe or feel better during those times? And questions really speak to our shared humanity and could be really loved and explored deeply by any child. And so I just wanted to add that in there because I think it's important for people to know like how hard I worked to make it a universal book, although the topic is very specific.
Yeah, I think it's very obvious that all that hard work, I mean, that is not something that has been done just haphazardly. It's so wonderful. I obviously have not had a chance to read the entire thing yet, but I am personally so looking forward to just diving into it because I know also like as a mom, as a homeschool mom, but as a mom in general, like I want my children to be very well-rounded and to be able to appreciate different cultures and different people for being different. Everybody is different. And that's what makes it a wonderful place. You know, yes, there are the struggles, there are the bad things, but you have to know about the bad things in order to appreciate the good things and to make a good positive change in the world, in your life, and in your community. And so I know that as a mom, sometimes you want to go out and you want to find something, you know, as homeschoolers, we're always like looking and reading at like, what else can I find? And even if I enjoyed the curriculum that I'm using, but also we teach our kids that you can't just go to any kind of website and think that that is a reliable source. I know that I want to be very intentional about where I pull my resources from to share with my kids so that while they're also learning how to do the same. So I love that this is something that I know, like I don't have a doubt that I have to worry about what's included in this. You know, it's very obviously well done and thought out and intentional. And so I just appreciate you putting that out for everybody.
Thank you so much. And I always tell people, I'm like, I might read anything, you know, at any time, you won't know, but I do not like surprises. So I'm always looking for when someone's leaving a review for a book, please don't surprise me. Like, let me know as a parent and let me decide for myself. And so these books are, you know, nothing to worry about. There are a few of the young adult books because young adult, woo, let me tell you. But you know what? I kept with that mantra of no surprises. And so I put that in there. You know, I would say, hey, just want to let you know, in this book, there is, some profanity, or in this book, something else, whatever. So that parents can make their own educated decisions about it once they get to like the older teens. But all the rest of it, no, because I like literally there have been so many times where I'm like, girl, you let me down. You recommended this book, but you did not tell me everything about it. So I just always said, I'm not going to do that to people. So yeah, it is definitely such a help to have something that you can trust, or that's going to tell you exactly what to look out for if that's something that's important to you. So thank you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of it as you get the chance to read it.
Excited. Yeah. So do you have a favorite book or story from Soul School that just deeply like resonated with you? I know like you're so great at offering all the information on all the books, so it may be hard to narrow it down, but do you have one that just sticks out more?
It's funny. Every time someone asks me this, I give a different book. So I guess it's just whatever hits me that day. And right now I would say it's a picture book. It's called A Walk in the Woods. And it's a story. This little boy, he loses his father, and he's so sad because he was so close to his dad. But he finds after his dad's passing a like treasure map that his dad left him. And it leads him through the woods that he used to go into with his dad. And as he's walking, the woods, it's like cathartic. It's an experience. And when he gets to X marks the spot, there is a collection of little woodland creature drawings or sketches that his dad had made when he was his age. And so he's like giving them to his son. And so it just talks about grieving, but in the most beautiful way possible. Like, here's a father who left a gift behind when he knew his son would need it most. I thought that was really sweet. And to me, it's the perfect example of, like, we don't only have to give kids like cotton candy and sugar sprinkles in all of their books. we can talk about hard things, but it's like we want to see the redemptive moment in it. You know, we want that hope. We want the kids to be left with hope. And so I think that book is a perfect example, and it touches me every time I read it. So,
And what
I'll
was
say
the name
that
of
one
it
for
again?
A Walk in the Woods
In the Woods. You have
by
to
Nikki
remember
Grimes.
that. Okay. That's good to know. Note to self. Like, it sounds
Yeah.
great. I love it. Beyond Soul School, let's kind of just talk a little bit for a few minutes about like some of the other books that you've written. You have A Place to Belong, and then I know I personally really like the mini little books of like the different cultural things.
Heritage.
I love
Yeah, the Heritage. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, A Place to Belong, that was my first book. And that one's really, Soul School was born out of that. So A Place to Belong goes through all the aspects of family life and how you can help your children have really deep roots in your home so that they will spread wide branches towards other people. And that second part is really important because we hear a lot of things these days, you know, you should do this, you should do that, and this is important and that is important. And a lot of it's very performative and checking the box. And I'm like, well, that's not really what any of it's about. It's really about how we can raise our children to feel so secure in who they are that they are then feeling very open to reaching out towards other people. So that book talks about every aspect of the home, and one section was about books. And there was a chapter on books as mirrors, and a chapter on books as windows, and a chapter on what makes a good book anyway. And so when I was, you know, doing the rounds through book clubs and all of these things, talking about A Place to Belong, I would be trying to talk about the whole book, and everybody's talking to me about the book chapters. Like the moms were just so interested in that. And so Soul School was born of that because they were like, I love this, but like which books, you know? And I was like, oh my goodness, you guys are feisty. And so I wrote Soul School kind of as a follow-up that comes from, you know, the next step from that chapter, those chapters that people were so interested in A Place to Belong. And then on my website, people will find what I call heritage packs. And, you know, it's not a whole history curriculum, but it is, I'll call it an addendum to whatever history curriculum you already love, but that is incomplete. Really good, but incomplete. And this is an addendum to add to what you're doing that I think will help you feel more complete in what you're offering to your kids.
Yeah, that's
They're
good.
Black history. Yeah, Black history.
Are the books that are in the Soul School, are there a lot of them that you have mentioned before, like on Facebook or wherever, or on Instagram, or are they a mix?
Yeah, not really. So I tried really hard to, because so many of my followers already have all my heritage packs. So I was like, it was like a little challenge I gave myself. But you don't know about these books though. So a lot of Soul School, I would say that probably 80% of this books in Soul School I've never talked about elsewhere. And that's because a lot of them had just come out, like were just coming out during that time. And once I knew I was writing Soul School, I kind of saved a lot of those for that. But I think that they're all complementary in a lot of ways. The other thing is on my website, I share a lot of books of all sorts, but in Soul School, all of the books are in print. So I have a lot of out of print resources that you can still get used right on Thrift Books or wherever online. So I still talk about them on my website because I love these books. But in Soul School, I made sure everything was currently in print. And that was its own unique challenge. Yeah. So they're different. Yeah. Different sets of books.
Okay. I guess more on a serious note, but have you had much of people that have shared concern or whatever? You know, you have the haters, I guess you could say. They're everywhere, but have you had a lot of people that have asked, they've shared concerns about like, well, if you have diverse voices and education, and what about traditional classics, and like, you know, if their minds are not fully understanding and open to what all you're doing. Have you had a lot of that, or how do you address that?
Yeah, I do. It's always very consistent. It's always from people who don't know me very well and haven't followed my work for a long time. And so I usually just respond in two ways: that I've never, ever shared a message of replacement. It's always been about expansion. And that those traditional classics, like, I mean, I love me some Jane Austen, you know, like the Secret Garden, and I would never suggest a childhood without those stories. They're classics for a reason, and they need to remain so. And my kids read those books too. But more my message is they're not enough. And that new books are written today that are also going to someday be classics. And that for a lot of reasons, and honestly, racism being a main one, that those books also are limited in scope. And so we owe our children the opportunity to read those and beyond those. And so once I explain that, that helps a lot of people understand that this isn't like a replacement thing, you know. And then the other thing that I explain to people is that it can be hard to understand why this is important when your kid has never needed it. And that if your child came to you in tears and telling you, you know, how this is making me feel about myself and so on and so forth, I think you would be more motivated. And so I talk about this idea that we mother our own children, but we're called to mother each other's children too. And if I'm telling you that this situation is damaging to my children, as my sister in Christ, as my neighbor, it is your responsibility to help me fix it. And I have that responsibility to you and your children as well. So I think I look at it as more, it's like a collective project that we all need to work towards for the benefit of all of our children, and that we aren't called to only care about the children in our homes, but about each other's children as well. So usually once I say all that, they're like, okay. And then you're always going to have those people that are just, you know, you say the word diversity and they're like, you know, that's terrible. You're woke, DEI, go away. I hate you. And I'm just like, okay, you know what I mean? Like, God bless you. And maybe someday you'll come back around to my website and enjoy some of the books, and that's okay. But generally speaking, what I just said usually helps people really think deeply and reframe maybe what they originally thought when they started hearing about my work. But those people who have been following me for a long time, they're like, oh no, they trust me immensely. They know my heart, and they're always just waiting to see what I recommend next.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to address it, because you're right. For those that are open to wanting to understand, it makes complete sense to me to say we all work together and to mother other children as well. Absolutely. So it makes for a better community in the long run whenever we're raising up our children to love and appreciate one another and make sure that everyone is included. I think that's what we're called to do, is to love one another. What do you hope for your children would carry forward from the work that you've done?
Yeah, I think that what I want most for them is to carry forward two ideas. One, that when you have something placed on your heart and you've been given the gifts to do it, that it is your job to do these things, to share and to share the gifts that God's given you, to share your passions and ideas in the areas where you feel like you can contribute to making this world a better place, even in the smallest, tiniest way. That's a responsibility that you have. And I think the other thing is to always carry, like I always tell my kids, we're believers first, and God made us black. You know, both are true, but you can never do anything to further the cause or interest of your ethnicity or culture that goes against first the word of God. And so that stands above everything, and everything else we do in any other area comes next, you know, comes under that. And if they keep that in mind, I feel like, you know, everything's gonna be great. I do want them to educate people about who we are, and I want them to always have a seat at the table and for their voices to be heard. But I want them to walk into the room and sit at the table and speak as children of God. And so as long as they're doing that, I'm good. You know, do whatever it is else you want to go out there and do. Love your neighbor as yourself, and, you know, kind of move forward boldly. So I feel like my expectations aren't crazy, crazy high, but they're very serious. And they're things that we talk about a lot in our home.
Yeah. Have you found that whenever you are, you know, out and about, whether you're with a homeschool group or you're at an activity or just somewhere out in public, maybe whenever you go to like conferences, if they go with you and that kind of stuff, have you seen them have some of those qualities that you're wanting them to?
Yeah, definitely. But it takes refinement and practice. They can be rough around the edges. And so I'm still helping them. I'm still mothering them very much. So I see them heading in that direction. But, they will hear me say sometimes like you were corrective and what you were saying was true to that person. But the way that you said it, I'm not sure they could receive. So be careful about your tone. But speak boldly, like, hey, sister, what you said was right. But the way you said it, I don't know that you're achieving your goals. So just be careful with that. So little, corrections here and there. But yes, I see them growing in that way. And they are far beyond where I was at that age. For me, it was about silence. And no one ever told me to be quiet. I just was. I didn't think that I was supposed to say anything. So I see a boldness in them that I admire, and I want them to continue. It's the same thing. The way they are outside the house is the same thing I want them to have inside the house. You can tell me anything, but you're not going to talk to me any kind of way. And so you need to learn how to figure out how you're going to say what it is you want to say. And I'm here to listen, but you're not going to just say it any kind of way. So I think that that's the same lessons. Those are the same lessons they're learning outside the home as well. And, it's hard for them. They do come to conferences with me, of course, and people often we put like families on a pedestal and they're expecting like these amazing kids in every way. But like my little boy might be running around playing ninja, like in the middle of the expo or something, you know what I mean? Like they're still kids and they're just regular schmegular. And so they may not want to talk to you about the depths of this like historical fiction novel that took place during enslavement in, 1845. They might just not want to talk about that. My daughter might want to be like, oh my gosh, do you like my earrings I just got or whatever? And so I always remind people that I'm just a everyday mom, just like all of you. And my kids are everyday kids and they have a unique upbringing in some ways, but it hasn't changed the fact that they make mistakes and they're not always going to impress your socks off in every way, but that I'm doing my best and that they are great kids. And that's all we can really expect.
Yeah. I laughed whenever you said, like, I know you're not going to just come through here and talk to me like that. Can only imagine. I have felt myself saying things like, I appreciate that you felt like you could share that information with me, but the way that you delivered it was just not okay. Yeah. So, which we're all growing,
Delivery,
Yes, you have to, people are not going to listen to you if you tell them that way. I'm going to take it because I'm your mom. But if you said that to somebody else, it probably wouldn't go over as well as it does here. So I can appreciate that and relate to that for sure. So I think that's a great quality to try to develop in our kids, but also in ourselves. There are times where I too have wanted to just say some things and I felt like Holy Spirit was like, you need to not open your mouth in this moment. I'm like, fine, that I really want to say. And he's like, no, sorry.
I remember like early in my marriage, my mom came to visit and we had just one little baby. And I'm telling you, my husband could do no right. He wasn't bathing her right. He wasn't using the right soap. He wasn't doing whatever, all the stuff, just nag. And just the way I was doing. My mom, when he wasn't home one day, she was like, the way you talk to him, he is just a complete, loser when it comes to the baby. Like he can't do anything right. You're just constantly criticizing him and da-da-da. And I'm like, yeah, well, he did that wrong. That's not how you're supposed to do it. And she looked at me and she said, do you want to be right or do you want to be married? And I was like, that hit me on the deeply inside. And I did not like it, by the way. Yeah. And I just kind of walking out of the room a little bit, just like going to my room and thinking about it. But I came back later to talk to her about more. And, I understood deeply what she was saying. Like, he's not going to hurt that little girl. He loves her. And just because he doesn't bathe her the way that you bathe her, he doesn't do this the way that you do it, that's his daughter too. And the way they were talking to him is not healthy for your marriage. And I'm like, man, only a mom can come at you like that, right? Like to just tell you like it is. And so it stuck with me, this idea, do you want to be right or do you want to be heard, is kind of how I've changed that for my kids. And so you're right, but no one's listening to you. Right. And so you need to think of a different way to share your message. So.
Yeah, I think that fits right into what you're doing even across the board with your books and your social media, your website, all of that. You're exposing people in a positive way to information that draws them in, that will also help develop knowledge of your culture and your ethnicity and all of that. It's important information, but sometimes, even if it's good information, there are people out there that are not presenting it in a way that is inviting. It's more of accusing or, well, you should, or you're doing this wrong. And instead, you are saying, look, I know that what I have to share is correct, but I've also learned there's a beautiful way to share it, to invite people in. And you've done such a great job, even if that wasn't like the number one intention. That is just obviously just woven all throughout your home life, and it's developed into what everybody else is saying. So I just really appreciate you doing that.
Thank you. That's like a great compliment. I really appreciate that.
You're welcome. So what would you say is your vision, or do you have a vision for the future of diverse education or inclusive education? Do you have a vision for what that looks like?
Yeah, I mean, my ultimate vision, if it's not dreaming too big, is that I won't be needed. You know what I mean? Like, I am plugging holes right now and crossing bridges and building bridges and just repairing things, putting things places where they should have always been that's kind of my work. And I would love to like work myself out of a job. And there are other people that are doing this work too. I'm not the only one. And so ultimately, I think success would look like all of the resources are very representative of everybody, and it's all kind of sitting there all together. And our kids, our grandkids, our kids are wondering, what are you even talking about? That's the way it's supposed to be. And they're looking at us like, we don't know anything because of how we're talking about it used to be. So that to me would be the ultimate success. I don't plan to always be plugging holes and building bridges, because I hope that won't always be necessary.
Yeah, I think that's great. I would love that too, just to have your kids just kind of think this is just the norm. So yeah. I think that's a great vision to have. I have, as we need to wrap it. I feel like I could talk to you for all the live long day, but I know that we can't, at least not right now. And you are going to be coming to speak at the IAT conference in March. Super excited about that. I plan to be there. So then I'm just going to come and just follow you around. I'll just be like, hi, how's it going? Well, maybe not follow you around. That would be kind of creepy, but I'll totally be like, hey. But before we go, I have some rapid fire questions that I thought I would ask you. So first question is, favorite book from childhood?
Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry by Mildred D. Taylor.
Man, you didn't even have to think too long for that at all. I love that. Okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay. Coffee or tea or something else while working?
100% tea. Black tea, no sugar, no milk, straight up, all day long.
Okay. Do you have a dream travel destination with your family?
Yes, it's Ethiopia, and we keep trying to go. The tickets are never less than $950 per person. I check it all the time, because if those tickets ever, I hope the airline makes a mistake one day, I'm scooping them up that same day. So, that is my aunt, who was married to an Ethiopian man, but they were married before I was born. So my uncle is Ethiopian. My cousins are half Ethiopian. Therefore, I always had just a special place in my heart for that country. And I really, really want to go.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. Last one, if Charlotte Mason visited your home, what would you want to show her?
Ooh, that's a good question. Okay, I have to say two things. So I have an old original copy of one of her books, and I would want to show her, look, I have this book, and it's oh my goodness, just to show her how special her writing has been to me. And then I would want to show her my book, and I would want to get her thoughts on it.
Yeah, that's great. Good deal. Okay, so share where our listeners can connect with you. Where can they find you?
Sure. They can find more about my book at soulschoolbook.com. And the other book is aplacetobelongbook.com. And my website is heritagemom.com. And you can find me on socials at heritagemomblog.
Awesome. I hope everybody goes and checks it out, because if you have not already, you are missing out on incredible information and a whole community of people, and their life has to be sad because they haven't checked you out yet. So I hope everybody checks you out and comes to a conference in a few months and stops by and says hi and comes to listen to you speak. I know that everybody's always encouraged whenever they come and hear the words that you have to share. Do you have a closing message of encouragement or anything that you would like to share for parents?
The only thing I would say is just, I know how anxious homeschool moms can get about all that they're trying to do and how difficult it is at times, and just say, be encouraged that it is going to work out and you really are doing just what you're supposed to be doing, just where you're supposed to be doing it. So stay strong and consistent and keep going.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much again for being here. I really appreciate you taking the time, and you're a blessing.
Well, thank you so much. I'll see you soon.